Hi everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming. It's absolutely lovely to see everyone here today. Um, uh, I would like to start with an acknowledgement of country. Today we are gathered on Yorta Yorta Waka, and it's really important that we pay our respects to their connection to the sky, country, waterways. As we might know, treaty discussions are currently happening in Victoria, which is so imperative to our First Nations people here in Australia at the moment. So I'd also like to acknowledge that today we have Councillor Brophy from Greater Shepparton City Council, and I will get started. I hope that everyone's found food over there, and there's toilets just through there. I am Tone. I use they and she pronouns. I am a local young person. Also on the poster says entrepreneur, which is really cool. And I get to walk alongside a lot of young people in their experience and journey through their mental health challenges. I also get to do some really fun workshops every now and again, which highlights the connection to creativity in that mental wellbeing journey. So it's been really lovely to be asked to speak here alongside these incredible humans. And yeah, I guess today, Beyond the Game is about how we use the importance of connection, the importance of community, so your friends, your family, sporting clubs, school, anyone that you meet on the street. I know in Shepparton we have an amazing community that really rallies together in times of challenges. So using these things as a form of resilience, so that persistence, that dedication, that, yeah, it all comes hand in hand, and it's all very important. So thank you all for being here. I might get everyone to introduce themselves, and feel free to flex. Don't be shy. Taylor?
Sure. Hi, I'm Tayla Harris. I play for Melbourne Demons Footy Club in the AFLW. I'm also a professional boxer. I've won a couple Australian titles and Australasian titles. So I'm busy, and I'm a marriage celebrant, just to be a little bit more random. I'm actually from Brisbane. I grew up in Brisbane, and I've lived in Melbourne now for 6 years, I think. So yeah, I am someone who just wants to get the best out of myself and do it with good people around me along the way.
Amazing. Col?
G'day, I'm Col Pearse, part-time swimmer, full-time dairy farmer. Grew up in the local area near Echuca, about 20 minutes northwest. Moved to Melbourne at the age of 14 to pursue a swimming career. Swam in a dam for about 3 months, and now people know me as the kid who swam in the dam and the ginger from the Woolies ad.
Vanessa?
It's hard to follow up. I'm from Germany originally, so that's where the accent is from. I grew up there alongside my sisters and family. Started my sporting career after I lost my legs in an accident when I was 15. And along the way found the love of my life, which happened to be an Australian athlete. So that's how I ended up here. And now we have a beautiful little 2-year-old. And I'm proudly representing Australia now at my 4th games. Winning a couple of medals along the way, but I think what I really love about the sport is like things like we do here today, is connecting with the community, and they just had such an immense impact on how I became the person I am today. So really keen to get to know all of you guys today.
Thank you. And David, in your introduction, would you like to share a little bit about the work you do and what that means to us here today?
Yeah, sure. It was in about my late 20s when I came back to psychology, found my calling, and set out with a very clear, I guess, mission to support rural and semi-rural communities. So that's what I ended up doing. And long story short, that meant I took a room up in King Lake in about 2006, moved off the mountain. 2 years later, took a room in Whittlesea, and then in 2009, the Black Saturday fires happened. So I got caught up in the aftermath of that and lived and still live not far away. And so that changed the trajectory of what was occurring for my community, but also my professional work. And so long story short, whilst I still work in private practice with adults and young people, I travel a fair bit in Australia working with communities and organisations that are preparing for or are recovering from a disaster. So in coming through to an event like today, I think it's really amazing to be starting a conversation like this and starting to look at some of the commonalities and the links between sporting clubs and sporting involvements and community, and then connecting that with disasters, because something that's become really clear in the last 10 years is that the number one contributor to communities preparing better for disasters, responding better to them and recovering better from them is connection and relationships between people. So I'm just hoping we can talk about that in a bit more detail and unpack that.
And that's so important. So thank you, David, for being here as well. And this whole event is set up by Resilience and Recovery. Our team, Chanel and Peter over there, have done an amazing job of giving us the opportunity to really connect those dots between what it means as a community having experienced natural disasters and what it means for us as a community to really overcome that. So we're hoping to make it a bit of a discussion, a flow, and at the end there will be a chance for you to ask questions to our amazing athletes up here. So write them down so you don't forget. But let's just get into it. And I wanted to start with Tayla about what inclusion in sport means to you, and if there's any examples you might have about how that's been important.
Sure. I think inclusion in sport is paramount to our community. I think it really underpins when people feel that they belong, and I think that's critical to anyone and everyone's way of life. I think it's honestly the best feeling, and I'm sure we've all felt it, when you feel like you belong somewhere and that you're proud to be somewhere. Us all in this room, I'm sure we can say that about our communities that we're involved in and what we care about. And I think sport is just a really easy vehicle to do that. It's right there for us. We just need to have the right people in the roles to create a safe and inclusive environment. I think obviously I can speak on the gender piece, where I grew up playing AFL football in Brisbane, which was not necessarily the sport of choice, more so rugby at the time. And I was the only girl that I ever played with or against growing up as a young girl. So that was challenging in a way, but it also made me resilient and determined and not willing to take no for an answer. So I decided that as a 5-year-old, I was going to be playing in the men's AFL, whether anyone liked it or not. And it didn't quite work out with the men's AFL, but it has with AFLW. So I can be really happy and proud to say that I can speak to all of the young girls and boys in this room and say confidently that should you wish to grow up and play professional sport, you have so many opportunities to do so, which is my favourite conversation to have, because it wasn't my conversation. Well, perhaps people were telling me I couldn't, but I was saying I could, of course.
You created the conversation.
I created it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think from the question, being in an inclusive space is allowing everybody in any capacity to be involved in something. And there's also always an opportunity with sporting clubs, for example, volunteers and people. Everybody is as important to a sporting club or a community thriving and driving forward as the next person. The players are just as important as the administration staff, and the volunteers who have spent half of their life probably contributing their time are exactly as important as the star player on the field, in my opinion. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, it absolutely does. And I really like that even outside of you as a player, you're still highlighting like that sense of belonging, right? At any level, your connection, your contribution is so important. I really appreciate that. Cole, do you have anything to add to that? Like, what does inclusion in your sport mean to you?
Yeah, mine's a bit very similar to Taylor's. I think growing up in a local area down near Echuca, living with a disability, missing my right foot, there's not many people. Not many people have prosthetic legs, not many people are in wheelchairs or have any form of disability. They tend to hide it. So growing up in Echuca, I was always kind of the kid in the pool with the disability. And at the time, being from about 5 to 14, I didn't really care too much about what people thought of me or really what inclusivity was. Up until I remember it was about grade 5 at one of the local comps in Echuca. And one young fella just said to me, he goes, "You've got an ugly leg. Why are you swimming in the race?" And at the time, I immediately said, "Well, you're ugly and you're racing too." That was my initial response. And as I sort of got a bit more older, I understood how people treat people with disabilities a little differently to what we call able-bodied people. And that's where, in a sense, where I then started valuing people who treated me as a normal human being, not necessarily someone with a disability. And for example, when I moved to Melbourne, when I'm in an Olympic program, so I trained down at MSAC, big pool right next to the lake in Melbourne. And there's 8 athletes, 2 Olympians, 1 Paralympian, that being me. And when we talk about that, I mainly talk about in the fact that those guys are all striving to make the Olympic team, not the Paralympic team. I'm the only one in that group striving for that. And when we talk about inclusivity, it's not even just being included in that group, but it's also having my voice heard and them making me feel like I belong. Because when you talk about when people say, he's a Paralympian, he's got 1 foot, he's got 1 leg, probably shouldn't be in an Olympic program. When you put 2 and 2 together, I'm still a professional athlete striving to be one of the fastest swimmers or para swimmers in the world. Same thing as those guys. We've got the same values. We're at the pool 4 or 5 hours a day striving for the same thing. And by doing that, just including me in that high performance environment creates discussion back home in Melbourne that even though we've got female athletes, Paralympic athletes, we still are striving for that level of success regardless of where we come from, what's wrong with us, gender, etc. So for me, it's just having our voice heard, being included in that same high performance environment, and just having that level of respect from other people.
That's amazing. That's so amazing. And so great to just the transferable skills of what it means to feel belonging as well, and how different that can be to someone being like, yeah, no, you belong, but to actually feel that sense is really important. David, do you want to comment on how that inclusivity and belonging is relevant for the field of work that you're in?
Yeah, I really love the conversations here and the points coming up. I think also sort of fresh off the back of having spent last week in New South Wales talking to staff that are supporting communities affected by the 2022 floods. So the Northern Rivers team and various other locations. But Col's point in particular about voice actually came up in a series of these sessions because these communities are 3 years down the track now almost. And, the recovery journey after a disaster is often a really tough one and a really long one, which unless you've had the experience before or unless you're actually going through it, you don't know what it involves. And so very quickly, people who are having the real life experience can feel extremely forgotten. And so having their voice heard and hearing their needs heard is absolutely crucial. And that's what came up in these sessions that, finally, after a long time, a number of these community members, or communities, I should say, have now got good established supportive connections and relationships with people who work for organisations and agencies, and they feel like their needs are being heard. And the other sort of key thing that came through was they really feel like they're gaining a sense of control over the present, which is a massive thing. So when I hear comments like this and conversations like this, I know that things are starting to improve for people. But maybe just the other point to make here is that all of this, I think, whether it's sporting involvement, sporting clubs, or disaster-affected communities, all occurs within the context of a community, which it's maybe a little bit different to this setting, but I often tend to talk about communities as being a living ecosystem that when it's going well, it supports healthy, sustainable life. And the integral part of communities in any ecosystem is healthy connections between things or between people. So, feeling heard, feeling connected, having a sense of control are all really, really important things. So I think these are just a few touch points, but, some interesting ones.
No, thank you so much. And I, as a local, was around for our 2022 floods as well, and I really resonated with that sense of control, right? It just felt so out of my circle of control and what I had the ability to have power over. But seeing just even, I don't know if you guys are around, but even just on Facebook, seeing like local community clubs, our, North End Community House, South End Community House, sporting clubs, they were the ones who were out in the tinnies delivering food to people. They were supporting the SES. The showgrounds was full of people, volunteers, filling up sandbags for us. And yeah, it was just this like beautiful show of people coming together. And even seeing that parasocially online, it was just, it made me feel a lot more connected to, all right, cool, we've got this. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And Vanessa, I just wanted to know a bit about what that preparedness means for you in your sport, and what kind of role does like resilience play for you?
Yeah, and it's so interesting in the world of sport. We feel like preparedness is everything, right? We train every single day to prepare the best we can be, whether that's physical training in the mental space, the ability to compete. But I've been doing this for a very long time now, and there's always things you can't control. Like in every single season, I think there was like a six 6 years in a row where I simply just didn't get to the season in one piece, where there's injuries popping up, there's somewhat of an obstacle of something breaking, something either not working out the way, a coach leaving. I mean, there's like constant change that we can't really plan for. And I think that's when I really realized that there's actually no such thing as everything going to plan. Like, we actually really have to expect things to not go to plan, and we have to find a way and that helps us deal with it when it comes our way, and it will. And I think that's where I stepped onto the field of play this time in Paris this year. And this season went far from amazing. I mean, anything from like a stress fracture in my femur, which is like really quite major for what I do, to having a baby 2 years ago. That meant a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of things you can't really plan for. I stepped out in the field and I felt the best prepared I possibly could have. And not because everything went well, but because it didn't. I expected it to. And I had my personal strategies and how I deal with it. And I had my support network that I can fall back on, the ones that help me through the tough times. I have my mentors that are there to not just tell me what I want to hear, but also the hard truth, and helping me work through my difficulties and finding the answers myself. But it also meant stepping into and away from the sport and finding my space within community, understanding that I'm not just defined by the things I do in sport, and understanding that it's not about just being successful and good and happy all the time, but in any way we show up in community and around the people around us, it has an impact. And the way that we deal with adversity and struggling times actually has a bigger impact on the people around us and how they see and perceive the world than our positive times. And I think that gave me a lot of purpose in the preparation for Paris. And when I stepped onto the field, I felt I was in the best possible space, because in how my preparation went, and not because it was perfect, but because it tested me in ways that made me the strong athlete that stepped out and was fending for the gold medal.
Yeah, that's such a great, well-rounded response. And even when we were talking before, you mentioned this analogy, like moving your focus to the pedals, not the podium, based on a cyclist team around, the process of focusing on that journey and on, what you can control, rather than, all right, where's the destination? And I guess this is a super random analogy that I'm coming back to, but I went camping a couple of weeks ago and one of my friends told me, oh yeah, if everything goes to plan, it's just a trip. But when things start to go wrong, if mistakes are happening, that's the adventure. And I think it's a really transferable thing of like, as long as you're just like in it for the process and to move through that, it's going to be great no matter what. And Taylor, like, do you have anything to add to this? Like, what is the role of like resilience and motivation been for you?
Yeah, I think the idea that anyone or anything could go perfectly, no one is gonna watch it. No one's gonna tune in if they already know that it's gonna go perfectly. In AFL, for example, the whole entire sport is based on mistakes. Like, no one is gonna tune in and watch on the weekend for a perfect game that no one actually has to clean up a ground ball that wasn't the perfect handball. Like, that's just not what we as fans or spectators want to see. So I think with sport, it's important to realize that the mistakes are the good bit and the exciting bit, and test you in the moment. All of the training, the hours that you do, ideally, you probably are in the more controlled, well, you are in the controlled environment. But then on game day, it's like, bring it on. Let's see how I react when things don't go exactly as they were supposed to. In boxing, there's a little bit more risk, I think, in playing with fire a little bit with that. You probably don't want to be too many times tested in that way, but you are for sure. Like in my last fight, there was a headbutt incident and my eye completely closed over. And so I had to go six more rounds with one eye. Like that's crazy. Like I was up against it with two eyes at the time because my opponent was excellent. And yeah, I lost the fight, but ultimately I felt like that fight I learned more about myself than ever. And I learned more about my team, my friends and family, because they were all there, all the same, and all equally as proud. So I think that was a pretty good experience and a real good reality check that things aren't going to go to plan, and that's why it's the good stuff.
That's amazing. I am terrified just hearing that. David, I want to know a bit about how, like, I guess you're coming from a perspective of like that preparedness is everything. And I guess I want to know a little bit more about how in the event of a disaster, are we learning from that, or are there steps we can take to prepare for that? And what about that, how much can we really prepare for? Like, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, there's a lot here, so I'll try to keep it brief, but again, just some fantastic, really interesting comments. Yeah, I guess maybe the other thing to say is, another key area of learning for me comes from having worked with lots of people over 20 years who've had really traumatic, adversive life experiences, all sorts of experiences, and so I've been able to really watch and witness firsthand how people get through those sorts of life events and how they recover. But with disasters, how communities do or don't get through. So I think coming to preparedness, there's two points I wanted to make. Firstly, actually, I heard in just the conversation there sort of two words stuck out to me. One was expectations, and the other, which wasn't mentioned, but I think I was hearing acceptance, like acceptance of making mistakes or acceptance of there being problems, and then setting expectations in line with that. And I think that really does have a piece for Australian communities in this disaster setting and in an era of, unfortunately, more frequent disasters, because disasters by definition don't go according to plan, and neither does recovery. Actually, no matter how well prepared people are, but preparation certainly has a really important role. So I think what I'd say here is at the outset, as things start to change in this country, there probably is something in accepting changes and adjusting our expectations, because if we don't do that, and if we either stick our head in the sand and deny or try to control everything, we actually remove the ability to be flexible and to adjust and to adapt. And adjustment and adaptation is really important for any human facing life hardship and challenge and recovering from trauma. I can tell you that for certain, and I'm sure for all of the athletes here, adjustment and adaptation is really crucial to them becoming the best athletes they can become. So I think that's a really important starting point. And then preparation, I'll make just a couple of points. Well, we always talk about physical preparation in this area of disasters. And, if we're talking about fires, that would mean having the property properly prepared. But an area that doesn't get spoken about as much and is equally as important, if not more important, is the area of emotional preparedness. And that means giving thought to how I might actually respond psychologically if I experience a disaster. Am I really sort of cut out for that? Have I given it any thought at all? And what we know and understand is that giving some forethought to how I'm probably going to respond or react in a real high-pressure situation helps people semi-prepare before they experience it and can help them get through. And then just the next step in my last point is, well, better prepared people and better prepared communities, both physically and emotionally, tend to get through the actual event better, and then they also tend to recover from it better. And this is without the all-important piece of community connection. So then when communities, or as I said, sort of living ecosystems come together and start to have conversations about preparation, and then actually take action to prepare, they definitely get through better and they definitely recover better. So, this is, I think, a point we can be maybe holding in our minds about building over time stronger and more connected communities in this country.
Yeah, and I really love how you've emphasized that adaptability and flexibility is a superpower in, forging that as well, which is so important. And Col, I guess you touched on it before, but I wanted to know a little bit more about what kind of barriers or biases you faced in your sport, like to get to where you are as such a success.
Yeah, well, there's been a few. I think being ginger's not easy. No, I think I think the main barrier I faced was probably during the 2020 COVID lockdown. Like I said, growing up on a dairy farm, I sort of have that luxury of having two homes. So moved up to Melbourne at 14, and during 2020, I was in year 11, so I was 16. Pool shut, school shut, etc. We all know what happened. Overall, I went back to the farm, and I remember my mum had sent a Snapchat of the dam, which we pretty much feed our cows with the water, etc. She sends a photo of the dam, and it's like Pearse Aquatic Centre coming soon. And I kind of was like, what are you going on about? Like, what have you smoked this morning? Like, what is that? Anyways, I get home, and she's told me that I'm going to start swimming in the Dairy Dam in preparation for the Tokyo Paralympics, which about 2 days later were cancelled and then postponed till 2021. Anyways, I'll skip some of the boring details, but we essentially turned our family dam into what we call the Pearse Aquatic Centre. So it was like 46 metres long, and I don't know, I think Shepparton might be a bit more familiar with a bit of the story, but the Woolworths commercial that was there, that dam pretty much just sums it all up, swimming in a dirty, murky water with a full wetsuit on, cap and goggles. And so for about 3 months during that initial period of COVID lockdown, where it was March, April, May, where just no one knew what was going on. Like, as an athlete, still studying, never made I made one Australian team, but not a Paralympic team. And that's all I wanted to be, was a Paralympian, not just an Australian swimmer. So those 3 months, like, it sounds easy when I say it like that, but every morning at 6 a.m. before sun came up, there'd be ducks in there. You'd see fish, so occasionally a cow just taking a big old turd in that dam as well. So for me, I'm like 16, being like, this really is not worth it. And as COVID and as more news kept dropping on Tokyo cancelling, it's too much money, etc., the psychological standpoint of like, is this even worth it? Like, I'm swimming in a dam. The ice recovery baths we had at Paris this year were about 11, 12 degrees, the water temp. The dam got to about 8 degrees. So it was colder than the ice baths. So that was getting closer to winter. So that for me was probably one of the toughest barriers in my swimming career. Like, there's been many, like missing a foot, growing up on a farm, feeling different to everyone else, moving to Melbourne and not knowing anyone. Like, that's been challenging, but nothing can compare to swimming in a dairy dam for 3 months and not knowing where, like, even if it's worth it.
That is terrifying.
Especially when there's yabbies too.
Yeah. Oh, the little claws. Tayla, did you want to tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you faced to get to where you are, especially around, you mentioned before that like 5-year-old little girl just being like, I have to do this, I have to do this. Like, what were some of the other challenges you faced to get to where you are?
Sure, yeah, I think that mindset from being young has held me in good stead for the challenges that were imminent to come. There's plenty, obviously. We all have them. But I think a couple that come to mind, injury actually is an easy one at the moment. I've had 2 shoulder operations back to back, and in AFL footy, that's probably not ideal. But in my opinion, for the first time ever, I'm going to have stable shoulders that are literally screwed in place. And my dad gave me a really good analogy, I suppose. He's a boat mechanic, and because I was a bit worried about the surgery, I'd never had a surgery, let alone been to the hospital even, and so I was feeling worried about what's going to happen. Am I going to be back to myself? And he said, you don't buy a car or a boat and not expect to service it or upgrade it. So that helped me a lot. So then I rolled right in there, got the anaesthetic and got cut open, but it's come along well, thankfully. But yeah, I think obviously that's one barrier. And then with football, so I've had a few public sagas unfold, which is not ideal. I'm just a kid from Brisbane who just likes to play football with my friends, and people seem to want to have a few opinions about it. But yeah, I've got delisted from one of my clubs. So I was playing at Carlton, and I just simply wasn't seen as a good enough player. So I was sent away, and that's, it is what it is. I've got no shame in that. I was then determined to be better and got the opportunity to play at Melbourne Footy Club, won a premiership, and I'm really proud of that. So it was one of those scenarios where, of course, it was deflating and upsetting that this coach at the time didn't believe in my ability, but it's kind of like, I'll show you now. And then to go win a premiership is the ultimate, in my opinion. So yeah, that was obviously a really cool part of my career. But yeah, I guess similar has happened this season. Actually, with injury, obviously, I've missed 2 seasons for the most part through injury, which in this sport, it's actually quite important to actually get on the field and play. So I can understand why I'm probably on the back foot now. But again, I'm determined for next season to prove why. And knowing myself, I know that I'll be back better, and then I'll have the opportunity to have a microphone at some point and kind of just smile and say, yeah, I told you that, it's not actually rocket science in my opinion. So I guess there's a couple, hopefully.
Yeah, and I guess as well in that, like, you've done it before, you can do it again, right? You figured out the formula of mentally being able to get yourself to that space. It's going to be easy.
Yeah, so someone mentioned what's in your control earlier, and I just think that with perspective, obviously, we've got people speaking about that, like the challenges we face are all isolated to our own experience, but I think there's always an opportunity to step back and understand that perspective has to come into this, and if nothing else but a motivator. And I think I can be really fortunate to say that I haven't had to experience any challenges that other people in this panel, but also people that are in my life have experienced that are much more life altering, I would say, and so I can draw on their resilience, and then take a little bit of that for myself.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point as well around each of us here and in the world have such unique experiences, and anytime you're talking to someone and you want to feel that connection, it's almost like a grab at like, tell me that you know what I'm going through, but it really has nothing to do with what the actual situation is, and it has everything to do with you're angry or you're upset or you're disappointed. And I felt like that before as well, right? It's not the situation, it's the feeling that we get to really relate to and connect with people on, which I think is just really important to note. Vanessa, would you like to tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced to get to where you are?
I think, like thinking back over the last probably 20 years or so, I have one very obvious challenge, and I think everyone in the room can spot it. And I think, ironically, it's actually not the biggest challenge. Like in the last 20 years I encountered, it's more the opinion that come with that first impression of what people think my limitations are. And I think when I first went through that accident and found myself just waking up to just a very different reality of how I was seen in society and how I was perceived to have abilities and the abilities to contribute to community, but also participate in life, I think just really changed. And in retrospective, I think that is probably the biggest challenge that I really dealt with, is that essentially I felt like that the world tried to tell me that my medical prognosis meant that I have to change what's inside my heart, and I really lost the belief in myself that all the dreams and goals I had for myself were possible. And I think at the time I was 15, and at the best of times it's a challenging time, but I think I really lost myself along that, because not saying that sport necessarily is an identity, but it is a big important part of what you do and the way that you participate in life with your friends and the way you see yourself. And I think when I lost that part of me and I felt like that was never going to be me again, that sporty kid out there that was just love to run with her friends, I think I really lost a big part of what made me me. And I think there's no such thing as really overcoming that, because I was always going to miss my legs. I always knew that was not something where it could just be really resilient and come out the other side looking exactly the same as I left it. And I think it took me to get back into sport and do the things that I love, that I actually realized that that's actually not the point of overcoming adversity or facing challenges, is to overcome and come out the other side the same as we were before. But it's actually much more about diving into all the lessons you learn and into the new person that is coming out the other side. And like, it is actually making you a much more rounded person, because you understand what it means to go through challenge, and you understand all of a sudden like what you're made of. Because like, if you would have told anyone in this room like you were to lose your legs tomorrow, like no one would think they could deal with it. And then you go through a thing like that, and you just do, because we just don't know how strong we actually are. And I think when thinking about the flood relief, or the floods that you guys went through a few years ago, it's like, I think a lot of you would have, like, the way that we would have thought about it would have been probably almost more dramatic in some aspects, and obviously not as bad as expected in other aspects. So like, we don't really know what that new person coming out the other side might look like. And I think that was the biggest challenge in finding myself along the way, and finding out who that new person is, and how that person chooses to show up in life, and how I choose to contribute to community and interact with my friends and family. And I think that is a really challenging thing to do, and I think that's the hardest bit in adapting to change and challenge.
I absolutely love that. And as you were talking, I was just like imagining like a caterpillar like going into a cocoon, right? It doesn't know what it's going to come out as. It doesn't know, am I going to come out a caterpillar again, or am I going to turn into a beautiful butterfly, you know? And that's the thing, like, you do things and you don't know, and it's like you said, that inner strength that just comes from somewhere, right? Like it's almost inexplainable. But I guess like in what you're saying, how important was community in becoming a champion, in being able to, you know, find yourself?
And it's like, it is really funny, because like, in some aspects I felt like my parents, like in retrospective, were the ones going through the real struggle, because they had to sit back and obviously watch me do okay. Like, they couldn't do it for me, they couldn't take the difficult times away. And all the people that loved me the most, obviously cared the most, they didn't have the chance to grow into that situation as I did. But I think when, like, there's still actually a picture I have still on the desktop on my laptop after all these years, and it's like every single person that I barely even knew their names of, like, took a picture as like, we're all here, we don't know in what capacity we can help, but like, if there's anything we can do, like, just know that we're here. And I think the pure fact that people are willing to go above and beyond of what they can afford, what they can give in time or in resources, they're wanting to contribute for everyone to do well. I think that just shows like what humans are really made of. Like, we are so connected in the way that we are willing to help each other, are there for each other, and are willing to carry the burden together. I think that's what makes us that exceptional species that we are.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And Col, outside of developing the Pearse Swimming Centre, how important was community, your friends, your family, your local area in helping you become a champion?
Yeah, it's probably the main thing, because being on a dairy farm, we've got to look after 535 cows, which means mum, dad, the whole family, workers. That's obviously family's priority, but when it comes to a day-to-day aspect, that's a priority, and my swimming would be second, especially when I'm not on an Australian swim team. So I would get different people rocking up to the house, driving me to the pool, like over public holidays in particular. Because we are dairy farmers, there is quite literally no days off. Christmas Day, doesn't matter if it's 45 degrees tomorrow, they still have to get milked. So everyone around the local community would actually come and offer to pick me up, to take me to Melbourne, take me to Bendigo for all these swimming competitions when we were too busy with work. I remember the 2011 flood, so not 2022, but over 13 odd years ago. I remember one of Grandma's friends, when Facebook just kicked off and they were all getting around it, they actually dropped me off in Melbourne, stayed in a hotel with me while there was a swimming competition on, because like our farm was in jeopardy of flooding, animals dying, etc. with the help of the community, being able to support my swimming and support that dream that wasn't given. Like at 2011, I was like 8 years old. All I wanted to be was a Paralympian. But in order to make it, the community had to come together. Like I said, with the dairy dam, there's about 10 people behind the scenes who helped build all that. Like it all happened in about 3 hours, but it took 10, 15 people to go into town to buy it because it was during COVID. So everyone was just rushing to buy home gym equipment, milk bottles. Sounds really simple, but like I said, when COVID was happening, you guys remember how the shops were just, everyone was just grabbing as much as they possibly could. So once again, we did a bit of a Facebook post on the Lockington community, which is another really small town, 30 minutes out of Echuca. It's like 300 people. Just rock up on the door, just drop off like 30 bottles of orange juice left over, hay string from just a sheep farmer that lives behind us. So they all sort of like, my career is shaped by the community, and it's essentially helped me get to where I am, because being, like I said, on a dairy farm, that is our business. Regardless of the situation, the cows are the priority because they have to eat, drink, and be safe.
I love that so much, because it almost is like each of us are just like this like whole puzzle made up of pieces of all the people who have ever loved us and done things for us, and it all makes such a massive impact. And I also was on a farm in those floods out to Lamberways, and it was crazy. It was really, really scary, and being really young, that was so impactful. But what was also really impactful was seeing just the whole community come together and just be like, all right, you need this, I've got that, let's like get it sorted. And yeah, so it makes a massive difference having people show up for you. David, how important is it for us to have community? What does that mean for us?
Yeah, well, if we're talking about just in general day-to-day life, it's really important, and it's really clear that being well connected just in general to other humans is supportive of health and well-being. But if we talk about disasters, I was going to mention that something again that's come through in the last 10 years really clearly is that there are three main types of relationships that are important for us as humans. We've got names for them. They're called bonding, bridging, and linking ties. And bonding ties are the connections with people in your inner circle. So family and friends, including your besties. Then there's your bridging ties. So they would be like the connections that probably some of you have in the room here. You'll be friends and know of each other, or be acquaintances, but maybe not besties, or, family members. Or these are the sort of relationships I think that form a lot in sporting clubs. And then there's what they call linking ties. And these are the connections that just ordinary general community members have with a few sort of important, maybe high profile, even powerful people, like a politician or an MP or a mayor or a councillor. And in disasters, it's actually the bridging ties and the linking ties. So your inner circle ties are important, but it's the other two that are really, really important. Again, when it comes to preparedness and response and recovery. So we know that communities that have a lot of those bridging and linking ties, they tend to experience less loss of life, less injury in the context of disasters, and tend to recover better. So, again, coming through to community, we can even break it down now into that sort of detail. And Col's explanation and the sort of the other stories here that we're hearing about based on lived experience, it's sort of telling us really clearly that those three types of ties are important, but actually just the word being able to be spread out to the broader community, and then people just pitching in and doing what needs to be done at the time, which is what humans do, is what gets people through a lot of the time. People don't, when it comes to disasters in communities, they don't sit around waiting for emergency services to rock up. I mean, of course, it's great if they are there, but if they're not there, who else have you got to rely on? Yourselves and your community. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and you're so right. I think it's so important to have that emphasis, right, on like checking on your friends, but it's also checking on your neighbors, like that this person lives there on the street, and when something's happening, let's go check on them. We know that their family is away or whatever it is, and you're right, how much that willingness from what even could be a perfect stranger, but I've seen you around here, like yada yada, it all makes such a big difference. And coming back around to inclusivity, Tayla, I was really wondering about, have you seen any changes in the last 5 years around inclusivity, and what are your predictions in the next 5 or 10 years about inclusivity?
Yeah, sure. I think obviously with what I shared earlier about being a young person, then all of a sudden having the opportunity, and the comment earlier about being able to say to young people now confidently that you can be what you want to be it's just literally the best thing that could have happened. But now, obviously, the next step is to continue to provide those spaces and to the same standard as what obviously the men have had access to for a long time, when I'm obviously speaking on gender. And I think right now there's so many examples of how that looks on a surface level. I think AFLW is an easy one, obviously, I can talk about, but the difference between men's and women's. And I think, of course, there's arguments as to why that it's not there yet, and there's time and all these sorts of things. But I think the bottom line is my favourite argument that is hilarious when the truth actually comes out is that obviously a lot of people think that AFLW shouldn't be getting paid the same because we don't bring in the same money. Well, there's actually the fact that there's been a 500+% increase since the inception of AFLW in junior sport participation. And I think a lot of parents know that it's not cheap to be signing up to play junior sport. So I think that injection of money into the AFL, or the industry in the AFL itself, speaks for itself, not the $10 ticket that people pay to walk through the door to watch a game on a 35-degree day. That's not it. That's not the target market. But young people, and for me, it's obviously money is one conversation, but it's not that. It's just the fact that young people are able to, as I touched on earlier, have a space to feel safe, and who knows what the trajectory of their life would have been otherwise had they not have been had the ability to walk into a sporting team or club and have purpose. And I think that's, if nothing else, there's going to be people that you otherwise not know, but hopefully stayed on a good track in life, and we can be thankful for that.
Yeah, and you make such a good point, right? It's that representation. It's that now young people get to be like, oh yeah, cool, I have the option, and it doesn't feel as difficult or as challenging of being like, oh, I've got to change the whole game to get there. It's like, all right, no, some people are creating pathways for us. And Vanessa, before you mentioned the importance of your mentors and how it's not always, oh yeah, go on, go get it. Sometimes it's really reeling you back in and being like, oh, there's some things that we got to do here. And it's that well-rounded experience. And Vanessa, what about you? That inclusivity in your sport, how's it been? How's it changed? And where are your predictions for the next couple of years?
I think when coming from the perspective of inclusion for people with a disability in particular, I think we're in the most exciting part in our careers and in our sport, because when you look at the sheer numbers, I remember this season I've been having these conversations that we need to have more visibility within the sporting environment of those teams that are having people with disabilities on. And it was always the same answer. They don't get bums on the seats. We can't use them to advertise, because at the end of the day, we need to pay the bills, and this is what's important. But then we saw the numbers coming in from Paris, and the most visited session across both Olympics and Paralympics was the para-athletic session at the Paralympic Games. So people equally wanted to see that and celebrate the sport. And then para-swimming made more money than swimming at the Olympics. So when you give people the opportunity to watch it, and you advertise for it, and you offer it in a prime time where people can actually go to the stadium and watch it, they do. And so I think very similar in the trajectory that we're seeing in female sport is I think we made so many assumptions about what people want to see and never actually gave it a chance to actually give people what they actually truly want to say. So I think just going forward, I really hope we can just remove some of these assumptions and actually give a really true presentation of what this society looks like in representing females and males equally, and giving the same opportunity, not just in money, but also the way that the sport is seen and the way we put resources into it. But the same goes for disability. The same goes for a lot of different minority groups within this world that are just not getting the percentage and being represented. And I think it truly matters, because when you look at any aspect in life, and I think more and more companies are now adopting these inclusion policies, they realize it's actually really beneficial, because let's say, including a person with a disability, they become really nifty and trying to find and figure out ways how to do things. And all of a sudden, everyone benefits. Like the electric toothbrush was like invented by a person that needed it out of a physical lack of abilities, or audiobooks. Like there's so many inventions that are like based on people having different abilities and their contribution that actually made society better for everyone. And so I think that's how we need to see sport, like being able to everyone equally contribute makes the world better for everyone.
And I love your emphasis as well on letting people decide for themselves. Like, don't tell us what's important and what's not. Like, as a collective, we will decide if given the opportunity. And I love that so much. Cole, what about you? How has inclusivity been in swimming, and where do you think that's going?
Yeah, I think in swimming it's had its ups and downs over the previous years in media. I think coming from a Olympic standpoint, as Vanessa mentioned, I think you said the Paralympics had more, or maybe more money or more viewership? More money. I think when it comes to that, like, that's not my main priority. Like, I'm still 21. Money will come down the track, but my main priority is having something like Paralympic athletes in Olympic programs, like setting that standard for the guys who are obviously slower, like myself, striving to be better. As I mentioned, like, I'm an Olympic program. I'm the only para swimmer in the swim team that's in an Olympic program. There's 31 Paralympic athletes. 30 out of 31 aren't in Olympic programs. All the Olympic athletes are all in high performance sports. They get all the access needed. If they sneeze and it hurts a little bit, they get treatment straight away. I think with Paralympic guys, it's a little bit, we're sort of shoved to the side. We're kind of put on a waiting list. But for me, like, I do feel a bit spoiled, and that's where I can sort of have that perspective on knowing how the Olympic guys are treated. They're in business and all this fancy class, where the paras are an economy, essentially, in the swimming world when it comes to high performance sports. So for me, it's getting better. I think as we lead now towards 2028, we can sort of reshift, refocus. I've recently joined like the ASA, which is like pretty much the swimming board, to be able to put my voice forward and say, as a Paralympian, we need to start putting more emphasis on getting Paralympic athletes amongst Olympic athletes and showing them how high performance works, learning off each other, because there's a lot Olympic athletes can learn from Paralympic athletes. And even better, moving towards 2032, I think in swimming in particular, like, obviously it's every year. We've got world champs next year. We've got Com Games every 4 years. But the reality is no one cares up until the Olympic and Paralympics. So to be able to give young Paralympians who are striving to get to that level, letting them know and educating them and including them in that environment of like Olympic and Paralympic are the same thing, you're striving for the same, is what is getting better in the swimming world. I think we're really understanding that, or in my opinion, like, Paralympians are way more inspiring than Olympians. The theory is you guys can all be or for half the people in this room, you guys can all be Olympians, but very few can be Paralympians. I think Olympians can learn a lot from Paralympians in the sense that, you know, not everything in life goes your way. Sun comes up, sun comes down. And in the world of sport, you're going to have your bad days, you're going to have your good days. And what Olympic athletes can learn from Paralympic athletes is that, at the end of the day, your swimming career doesn't define you. It comes down to who you are as a person, what makes you happy. And I think leading in, we're really getting that sense of providing the services for Paralympic athletes to be able to achieve that elite level of Paralympic gold medals, or even just getting on the podium and on Australian Paralympic teams.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I also love your emphasis there on the sharing the knowledge, you know, like when you have a disability or any flavor of a disadvantage, it often feels like you're the one who's in a deficit and people have to give to you. But to really like acknowledge and empower that it's reciprocal, that both of us have things to share with each other, that both of our experiences are so necessary to the growth of what our shared passion is. I think that's really beautiful. And David, I'm wondering for you, in that disaster and recovery world, where's it going? What's going to happen?
There's probably two, or I don't know, maybe three main points here, Tones. Just something that popped into my mind again as everyone was talking, and I'm saying this, you know, not knowing who in this room has had a disaster experience or is still going through one, but anyway, coming through to a point, something that we see occur in communities towards the end of the first year, definitely in the second year, also in the third, fourth year, etc. is people losing sight of their commonalities, even though they're from the same community. So actually being included or inclusiveness can start to decrease a bit. I don't want to paint too rosy a picture and say it's always really good. So, sometimes people forget that it doesn't matter whether you're flooded or not flooded, or your home is burnt or it isn't burned. People are still having a disaster affected experience in some sort of way, and they're also always part of the same community. So, on this point, what we sort of try to bring people back through to is recognising the similarities and focusing on them, because they support relationships rather than focusing on differences. But then maybe just coming through to another point and linking to what you said there, Tones, well, where are we headed? Well, we're probably headed to more frequent and intense disasters, but that's already been happening over the last 5 years, and that's unfolding around the world at the moment. But things have also really started to change, like in Australia, in this disaster area of work, where groups that really weren't included not that long ago now really are being included. So it's amazing that young people have been given a voice in this area, particularly in the context of the climate emergency and disasters. They'll be living with it for a lot longer than some of us will be, like myself. Our First Nations people as well, we're really now starting to pay attention to the way they have lived with the land rather than on the land and used it. And we're taking from their practices. I know the emergency services are from a preparedness perspective. And last point, just a few weeks ago, there were the Resilient Australia Awards in Canberra, which recognises people's and groups' outstanding efforts in this area. And there was an amazing project involving people with a disability in far north Queensland, or actually west of Queensland, where it's harsh, dry, arid conditions, fires and floods prevail. And it was a project that involved people with a disability working with emergency services to become better prepared. So, we're becoming far more inclusive as a sector. We're not there yet. We've got a long way to go, but definitely the start has been made.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. In a moment, we're going to move to questions. So if you've got anything burning, think on it. You've got a moment, because I'm being very selfish and I'm asking a personal question to everyone up here. It can be related to your sport, your craft, anything at all. But I want to know from each of you what you feel your biggest achievement has been. We'll start with Vanessa. You can pass it if you would like a moment.
No, it's all good. I think when we were just chatting in the room back there, I think what I was talking about then for everyone else in the room, so I now competed at 4 Paralympic Games and I won 3 back-to-back gold medals, which is like, when I started the career, unheard of, and no one has really ever done it. But what made me the most proud is the way that I showed up at these games this year in particular, as a mom of a 2-year-old that had to really fight really hard to keep my space in the sporting world, where especially in athletics there's just not the framework around yet to allow females to go back into the sport, and actually doing it in a way that I encouraged positive conversations, and I felt like I affected positive change while also maintaining really healthy relationships with the people that we didn't have the same views. And above all, as much as he's only 2 and he won't remember much of this, I feel like it makes me the most proud that he gets to witness firsthand what it means to pursue something that's close to your heart and actually dedicate so much into it, but also do it in a way that makes me feel proud and makes me feel like I'm walking away and walking home, and I felt like I showed up in the character that I aim to be, and I think that is probably what made me the most proud.
That's amazing. Tay?
I'd say obviously winning the premiership was really cool, but a bit of a random one. I spent, since I was 15 years old, ambitiously saving to get my dad the car that he had to sell when me and my brother were born, because it was a 2-door Ford XB Falcon Coupe. So he spoke about that as if it was his 3rd child. So I decided that it was important to repay that. And I think my parents have been the most unbelievable supporters I could ever have asked for. So this was something that I was set on. So I was mowing the lawn for $20 and squirreling it away and thinking I'll spend that. So a few things fell into place and I was able to get that for my dad, and I gave it to him a few Christmases ago. It's obviously, that's ridiculous to give a card for Christmas, whatever, but it was very much a long 10-year process. But yeah, he's not really an emotional character, but he was lost for words, and tells me literally every day what it's doing, and that it'll be mine again one day and whatever, and I'm just like, just enjoy it please, that's all I ask. So that bit random, but yeah, that's probably my most proud thing.
That's so gorgeous. I can't believe it was a falcon. Even like just so far in these responses, it's so evident that like that connection to other people is like so important, and what it means for us to feel achievement and success within ourselves. Cole, what's your biggest achievement?
I've sort of got two. Most recently, yesterday in cricket in league, I made 81 runs not out. So I was pretty chuffed with that. No. I think like when it comes to performance, like, yeah, it's cool. It's cool to like have that status and those medals and show them off. But I think what's probably my proudest achievement is, like I said, being in a local area, growing up in the middle of nowhere, walking down the street and people recognizing who I am. And what I mean is more kids will come up and want photos with me. They want to know who I am. They want to chat to me, ask questions. And I had one individual once say he wants to chop off his foot so he can be a Paralympian just like me. Which I thought that was probably one of the sweetest things someone could ever say, because when I was his age, I was sort of a bit self-conscious about my prosthetic leg, walking around in the town of Echuca. No one else, like I said, has a prosthetic leg. So to have kids who are able-bodied come up to me and say they want to be a Paralympian it's just mind-blowing, because it's the impact I've had on the community, that regardless that I do have a disability, they do love and adore me and want to be exactly like me, which is so crazy to think, because I'm 21 years old. Like, I don't take myself overly too serious, and kids in the area don't care that I have a disability. They love the fact I do, their parents do, and it's a great way to educate kids on, for something like me, my foot will never grow back. So to be able to have that impact on not just kids, but everyone in the community, that anything's possible regardless of the circumstances, you are amazing, and everyone's level of success is measured differently. So for me, it's just having everyone in the local area be proud of, me and my disability and how far I've come in life.
Yeah, that validation as well of like, all right, cool, this is worth it, I did this. And even like linking back to what you were saying before about like the impact that community had on you being able to like get to where you are, that's you giving back as well, is being that voice and that representation, and wanting to have a chat with kids on the street as well. That's really beautiful. And David, personal, professional, what's your biggest achievement?
No idea. Absolutely no idea. But I think professionally, maybe something I'm achieving, although I think of it more as a privilege, is being able to spend a lot of time with communities and individuals that are going through having a really difficult experience, whether that's a disaster experience or something else, and giving them a way to understand the experience they're having, not only in that moment, but then also to, I guess, through talking and words and conversations, map out a future pathway for people. And I was just going to sort of draw a connection with Vanessa's experience, in your accident. And, when people are sort of in the middle of something really, really challenging and life-changing, it's often really difficult to even know that there's a path ahead that is possibly going to transform you in a better way. So being able to mention that at the outset, very cautiously and carefully, and instill some hope and optimism amidst, great challenge. When I see that connects with people, it's really nice.
That's so lovely. All right, this is how we're going to do question time. I'm going to pick one of our beautiful panelists, and then if anyone has a question for them, we're going to do one per panelist. So does anyone have a question for Tayla? Yes? Wait, we've got a microphone coming over. Thank you, Chanel.
Thanks. Would you like me to sing? No.
Yes.
Yes.
I think you're all amazing, and thank you for breaking down so many barriers for other people as well, just by doing what you do. But Tayla, my question is for you. I did 10 years of Muay Thai kickboxing until I got an acquired brain injury, but it was really hard for me to walk into that gym space for the first time, being female. I just wondered, were there any barriers for you to do boxing?
Yeah, my first gym space experience, I've got a couple actually. That one when I was 12 with my dad, more of a cross training style at the local PCYC, and we went through the basketball court down to the little. There was like one bag hanging on the roof, whatever. And the coach was this guy, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I feel like I remember him having an eye patch. I'm not sure if I'm lying, but it was like obviously this guy was somewhat intimidating upon reflection, but. In saying that, I still, and I believe like in my core that I'm not a judgmental person, and this proves it when I think about these. I was like, cool, like this this guy's a little bit different. So I was a bit thinking like this person could teach me something because they've got a point of difference, was my little 12-year-old mind. So I was all in. I was like, I want to learn from this person. Clearly something's happened in their world that they can help me learn. It was Muay Thai, actually. You'd be happy to know that I first started. And then my next experience, probably when I was 17, I guess I had my driver's license by this point. So I took myself to the gym and I entered via the back door accidentally. And I walk in and I remember this guy. Later on, I worked out his fight name, and the only name he went by in the gym was The Force. And he was this monster of a man, full of tattoos, literally like 7 foot probably. Like he was just huge on the bicep curl machine. And I walk in and I'm a 17-year-old girl and he got off halfway through his set, got off the equipment and came over and said, really sweet, just said like, hi, like, do you need something and who are you looking for? And I said, oh, I'm not sure. I just thought I might see what it's like in here. Can I join up? And he was like, oh, absolutely. And he walks me around. He didn't work for the place. He just walks me around and says, this is this part of the gym and this is coach so-and-so. And they were in the middle of training someone else and they stop and shake my hand. Like this interaction was not isolated to this gym. This is what being involved in a gym that's big on community and big on inclusion is like, but it's not exactly how it seems it's not the carbon copy that every other workplace kind of does. It's the fact that anybody is welcome in this space, no matter your level, ability, gender, or, you know, if you're a professional or if you're just starting out. So that experience, like, it was critical, obviously, to my following years and my love for the sport. Was this is not about punching someone, and it never has been. And you know, like, it's about the whole package that you receive when you walk into a space that you feel really accepted. And then my first coach, the reason I went from Muay Thai to boxing was a quick story, but my first coach, Aaron, he actually, this is a bit grim, but he actually passed away suddenly. And I turned up at training to train and he wasn't there, obviously. And then it all came about that he'd had a heart attack. And then from that moment, obviously he was the head kickboxing coach. There was only a boxing coach. So I then trained with Farris next. And then my entire ambition for my career was to fight for Aaron, essentially, because he had been my first influence in the sport. And it's interesting, a lot of people want to have opinions about why I would do this sport, and a lot of people say things about my face, and why would you want to get hit in the face or whatever. I don't really care about my face. I've got no ambition to do any modelling or anything like that, so it's all good. But I think the underlying thing that, had anyone actually taken the effort to realise, is that I'm doing it for something that no one would argue. It just goes to show, like, it's worthwhile actually investigating why someone does something that you think is a little bit different or crazy or silly, perhaps. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Thanks for the question.
That was so beautiful. Does anyone have a question for Col? Yeah.
Hi, Col. My name's Lucy, and I've got an 11-year-old with an above-knee amputation. And I agree with you. I think Paralympians are a lot more inspiring than normal Olympians. I think, you're amazing, but in particular Vanessa and Col, you've had to overcome your physical, barriers before you could compete at such elite level. As parents of Samuel, I'm just curious you mentioned like family support and community support, but what other things do you think really helped you both to, overcome that physical barriers to be able to get to that elite level. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, a coach, a beautiful coach who understands his impairment and his crazy mullet that I can see. But I think having a coach there to mentor you, because obviously you're his number one inspiration and mentor, but I think having a coach that's going to get him to that elite level is probably the number one important thing in terms of his swimming career, his sporting career and your career as well, because you'll learn that as we make Paralympic teams, AFLW teams, or any sort of sporting team, that parents have nothing to do with that. It's all coach-led. And if you put him in a good environment with good athletes, but more importantly, a good coach, he'll form that relationship and be able to build on that leading into significant sporting events and even events outside of sport. Because I think having that relationship with your parents, with your family, with your friends is important, but also with a coach, someone who you can listen to, lean on a bit, and sort of strategically plan around your impairment as well, because that's his job as a coach, is to work around his impairment and get him to that high performing level. So overall, a really good coach.
Vanessa, did you want to speak to that as well?
Yeah, for sure. And I can definitely agree. Like, a coach makes a massive impact. And I think what I really learned was, like, it was really great to have my friends and family, but they serve as friends and family. And I think it was really important for me to have someone outside. And I think when I moved to the US when I was quite young to pursue sport, and the coach that I ended up teaming up with, he served as like a really strong mentor. And I think the reality was we weren't really close friends. We actually fought like cats and dogs, but he was probably the first person that treated me as like a whole human. And I think as friends and family, we always have a bit of a bias to, I felt like everyone was taking everything off me. They're trying to make my life as easy as possible because I had it hard early in life. And I think that's both a beautiful trait for being a friend or a family member, but also really quite challenging for the person that is the one being cared for, because like to develop that confidence and the ability to live your own life on your own merit is like really quite challenging. And so I think the mentor that I had in the US, that was my coach, he was the first person to let me carry my backpack, my bag of running legs and the start blocks all by myself while he was walking to the track with his hands in a pocket. And it didn't come from a bad place, but it came from the space of like letting me know that I'm well and truly capable of taking care of myself. And I think finding someone that is giving you the ability to find your own power in whatever you pursue to do, whether that's sport or anything else, I think that's probably the most valuable thing you can do in connecting to a strong mentor or someone that is willing to be honest to you, willing to push you, but also there for you when it's hard.
Thank you.
Does anyone have another question for Vanessa?
Hi Vanessa, I'm Andrew. I'm an umpire for 24 years and I'm a radio announcer as well. I've just got a question for you. This may be a tough question, forgive me, but after your accident and you're in your hospital, what was going through your mind when you're going to be told that your legs are going to be amputated, and what made you decide in your mind that you're going to get through this and you're going to be an athlete no matter what?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because it's like I actually not saying nothing went through my mind, but like I went through like a big period. Like I was in a coma for a number of weeks and like went through like in and out of surgery for like half a year. So like there's actually really limited about like of memories in that whole period. The only thing I ever remember is like anytime I would wake up, someone was sitting next to my bed. And so that's something that stuck with me, that like how much it means that someone is there for you, independent whether you can talk or not. And I think the next thing was that I really quickly realized that what like makes a good life isn't having it good all the time, but it means like the things that we fill our days with. And like for me, that was always like friends and family, but it was also sport. And I think that was my desire to go back in the sport. Like I never had the plan to compete at the Paralympic Games. Like I actually couldn't have cared less whether I was competitive or not, or whether I was ever going to win a medal. I think it was really about picking something that like filled my day with things that I love doing. And when I first broke the question that I wanted to snowboard again, because like growing up, that was a big important part, I was like, well, like snowboarding, kind of touch and base, but like we know some athletes that have managed to run with your disability. And I think when I discovered that I could run again, which was something so close to my heart, I think that gave my new path like a really great direction and almost like a purpose and something I could like just chip away on. I think something to do. And I think that's how I ended up being an athlete, is not because I wanted to be great at it. I just found something that I loved and I chipped away on it.
Good answer. I like that answer.
Does anyone have a question for David? Yeah.
David, just want an opinion on, and this is coming from a sporting club perspective, and the side of that people join sporting clubs for community. And from my perspective, I think the community part in sporting clubs is getting a little bit lost with money factor and seeing juniors losing positions for better players. And, you know, you guys are always obviously very talented, so you'll always have a place to belong. People will always want you in clubs. How do we, and the parents of those kids, you know, probably can't see it because their kids are always going to belong somewhere. How do we implant those thoughts or put those thoughts out there for people to change their perspective of community clubs being about community and not everybody loves to win, but, you know, not always being the winning mindset?
Yeah, and sorry, just change the sort of the perspective in regard to, I missed something you said early on, I couldn't quite hear it, but so challenges in sporting clubs, I definitely, you know, heard you talking about, and then just bringing it through to your final question there, could you say that again?
Like, how do we change the mindset of people within community sporting clubs of just being about winning, so that even the children who aren't as talented have a place of belonging as well?
Good question. I think it's really important with, maybe if I say with some issues, or when mindsets are very set, if I put it that way, to not try to set about bringing about too much change too quickly, to chip away gradually. Because I think what I've seen over time is sometimes, and I don't know, I think Australians like to think of themselves as being direct, but we're not that direct. We tend to beat around the bush. But I think sometimes when we go too hard at something too quickly, people will just pull back or shut down. So, you know, I think, of course, using conversation and language, but sort of planting seeds of thought gradually over time is important. But maybe as I think about this now, you know, something else to consider might be using lived experience, real life stories, you know, like is happening today, or from other people in your community or other people that have had an association with a sporting club, maybe yours, maybe in others, who can come in maybe from time to time and talk about how winning actually wasn't everything, or sport wasn't, you know, the most crucial or important ingredient that contributed to whatever it might be, that actually it was other elements that were useful. So perhaps a key point or a principle there is to use stories and real life experiences as a way to bring important issues to the surface.
And I wonder, Tayla, do you have anything to add to that? You mentioned before that you actually got kicked off of a club for not being quote unquote good enough, and then you found your place somewhere else. Do you have anything to kind of bring to that discussion?
I think it's ironic that the athletes on this panel have all alluded to the fact that the actual winning moment wasn't the moment that is as memorable as the process. So I think I predict parents, perhaps more so than kids at times, understanding that like, I think it is, I agree, like challenging to have a huge amount of change, particularly at once, because change is scary and everyone in the room would know that like change isn't something that everyone's inclined to be all in on straight away. But I think, yeah, having a real emphasis on in a community sporting club, and I'm thankful that my community or my junior football club that I played for it was the Aspley Hornets in Brisbane, Northside, was a great club that had opportunities for everyone and anyone to be able to participate. Obviously game day is that hour or so where it, unfortunately, there isn't really a scenario where a young person who isn't quite at the level of the teammate who's literally next to them, like you can't slow the ball down, like it's gonna be that. But providing other spaces for them to excel, whether that be events, I don't know, something like this, for example, is always beneficial to be able to have young people, like I can imagine a scenario where a young person perhaps on the field isn't able to shine as much, but in this setting, for example, maybe the kid that is eager to ask a question, and that's a big moment to take the microphone, because the star athlete is perhaps shy in that scenario, so they might feel a little bit empowered. So I think just thinking a little bit laterally about ideas of how to give them an opportunity to shine, because for the young kids, like, it's got nothing to do with, like, they may be 8 years old, like they're not thinking about the bigger picture at all. They're just thinking about their moment in that time, and it's asking a lot of questions, like whether it be via parents or literally the kid. What makes you happy and what makes you feel good and feel okay? They might say something random like going to the canteen at halftime. Like, I don't know, something random. And then it's like, do they get the opportunity to be in the canteen, working in there, which I guess we think as adults, we think like that might not be something that they enjoy, but you'd obviously be surprised that kids, I know I had the most random things that made me happy when I was younger. But yeah, I think there's so many opportunities. And are you an umpire, did you say? Yes, I am. Yeah, so I think the thing, we need to place a bit of value and emphasis on young people actually wanting to strive to be something that isn't just traditional or just the athlete on the field. Like, I know so many young people who want to be an umpire or want to be, because they see themselves in something different, because they don't see themselves as the athlete at the time. So providing a space to dream, to be that, whatever it may be. It may be the volunteer. Like, I think that's the coolest thing. I remember the Australian Open, I think it was the Australian Open. There was young people that, maybe perhaps the cricket, someone dressed up as an umpire, and it was on the TV. And it was this whole thing, this young boy, I remember, in full kit, full umpiring kit, and he was unapologetically, I want to be an umpire. I do not care for the players. I care for the umpire. So yeah, maybe that's an idea.
And mate, can I say one thing? Just going to your question, popped into my mind listening to this. What I've seen being really important in community settings in groups is someone that's well respected and well connected, that has the personality and the capacity or the capability to introduce new ideas and still hold a group when they're challenged. And I've seen this happen time and time again. They're self-selected or they're deliberately selected, and then over time. So I guess this is sort of an issue or a point of leadership, which applies in organisational settings as well, or applies when you have a coach, or applies in a club.
Thank you guys so much for contributing with your questions. Can we please give a massive round of applause to our panellists?
Thank you.
This has been genuinely amazing to even share the space. It's been really, really beautiful and such a privilege, but with all of you as well. So thank you guys so much for coming out and for being a part of today and this discussion. We've got food, definitely help yourself. This crew is going to stick around a little bit if you have any more questions or want to have a chat. And